It only took until the very tail end of the offseason, but the Golden State Warriors officially have a full roster. After being rejuvenated last year by the addition of Jimmy Butler, the Warriors entered this offseason with a lot of promise. But after it's all come together, I gotta say, I'm pretty underwhelmed by these results. They brought back Jonathan Kuminga to a team-friendly deal, brought in a 38-year-old Al Horford to start at the center position, as well as a few pretty whatever role players. You could have convinced me that the Warriors would be entering this season as a contender after their second-round loss to Minnesota, but I don't think I can give them that title as of now. I think they need more change than this. But at the same time, you could argue that they were already on that level last year, and so long as injuries don't interfere, there's no reason to think it'd be any different this year. So which is it? Are the Warriors actually contending level, or is my original prediction with Butler that he would make them competitive but not great the actual reality in 2025? Let's talk about it. But first, I want to tell you about our sponsor, Factor. Factor just introduced its healthiest menu yet, doubling the size to 80+ rotating weekly meals, with double the seafood and protein options and even more Mediterranean meals than ever. Eating clean is so easy thanks to Factor, and Factor takes the guesswork out of eating smart for everyone, making portion control simple with meals that are 350 to 550 calories per serving. I've always needed to be fast and flexible for my schedule, and in the past that would mean sacrificing delicious, affordable food for the quickest and easiest option instead, but Factor changed that with fresh, never frozen meals delivered right to my door. And then all it takes is just 2 minutes in the microwave and my meal is ready. So head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code ASORUSTYFB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. Again, that is code ASORUSTYFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. And thank you to Factor for sponsoring this video. Last year, after acquiring Jimmy Butler at the trade deadline in exchange for Wiggins, Kyle Anderson, and a future first, the Warriors went 23-7, giving them a win percentage of 76.6%, which scaled to the 82-game regular season would theoretically result in 63 wins. This is the argument that one would make for the Warriors still very much being a strong contender in the West. But let's first take a look at that 30-game sample size, because there's a lot there. The first thing that bears mentioning is that this sample came at the tail end of the season, which should be pretty well known at this point to be a time where NBA teams kind of start to cool down their level of effort in anticipation for the playoffs, or for the sake of tanking. It's especially going to happen with highly established playoff teams and bottom-of-the-barrel teams. The Warriors were on the outside looking in before the Butler addition with a record of 25-26, ultimately finishing as a play-in team as a result. The initial record was primarily due to an abysmal roster construction that left a 36-year-old Steph Curry to carry the offense, but it was also in part due to the stronger strength of schedule early on. In the 30-game sample size with Jimmy, only 12 of those games were against teams above 500. Of their 23 wins, I'd only say 5 of them were against genuine contenders, 2 wins against the Knicks, as well as a win versus the Lakers, Nuggets, and Rockets. But in the case of those Knicks wins, 1 game was without Brunson and 1 game was without Cat. The Nuggets were without Jamal Murray and the Rockets were without Fred VanVleet. The only undeniably, completely legitimate win against a genuinely good team that was healthy was their April 3rd win versus the Lakers. So I don't really think you can treat this 23-7 record as absolute proof that this team has what it takes. I do think we should always give credit to teams for beating the teams that they're supposed to. Beforehand, the Warriors very much were not beating the teams that they were supposed to. So the Jimmy Butler addition was obviously, undeniably a massive improvement, but I don't think there is enough evidence in this record to indicate a contender status, nor is there enough evidence in their playoff performance in 2025. Round 1, they managed to win despite Jimmy Butler missing Game 3 and most of Game 2, They only got the win in Game 3 thanks to a Curry masterclass, as well as an insane outlier performance from Gary Payton II, who had 16 points on 7 of 9 shooting. If they let that game slip away, they would have lost the series, so credit to them for their perseverance, but also a lot of that was just Steph Curry being fueled by his desire to break the hearts of every single Rockets fan over and over and over again. Houston was also a very inexperienced team, and it did show a lot in Game 3. Still, the 7th seed beat the 2 seed. However, in round 2 versus Minnesota, Curry would go down in Game 1. They managed to win that Game 1 thanks to Buddy Hield going off, as well as Draymond Green going off. Weirdly enough, he went 4 for 10 from 3, and in the 13 minutes Steph played, he also put up 13 points. But after that, the series was pretty easy to close out for Minnesota, and Jimmy Butler, the ultimate playoff riser, put up some pretty pedestrian numbers by his standards, especially in the efficiency column. Obviously, the reason they went out in round 2 was more injury than anything else, but the thing is, can we really expect anything different than that this year? Butler has played under 60 games in 4 of his last 6 seasons. He missed the 2024 playoffs entirely, which sparked the conflict that got him to the Warriors in the first place. Curry has been fairly healthy in the last 2 years, but he missed major time in 2023, and in 2024, his team lost just 5 of the 8 games he missed, which doesn't seem like a lot, but this is the Western Conference, and that was enough to keep them in the play-in, which they would eventually lose. The Miami Heat consistently struggle to get a high seed in a really weak Eastern Conference due to Butler's absences. I am far more worried about Jimmy than Steph, but between the two of them, they can't really afford for either of them to miss time. The one game that Butler missed in the regular season after being traded there, they lost to the fucking Sixers, led by Quentin Grimes, despite Tyrese Maxey going 2 for 14. Obviously no Joel Embiid. The 3 games that Steph missed after adding Butler, they went 1-2, getting crushed by the lowly Miami Heat and handled rather easily by the lowly Atlanta Hawks. Their only win without both players available was against Milwaukee, where Giannis and Dame both had uncharacteristically awful performances. So that one feels like a fluke more than anything. I even went back and watched that specific game because I was like, maybe there's some evidence here. Maybe they just locked the fuck up. But no, they were just kind of missing shots that they normally would make. Steph is 37. Jimmy is 36 and pretty consistently missing 20 to 30 games a year. At best, the Warriors can hope to go 500 in those games that Butler misses, and even that feels a little bit generous. Now, maybe they could work their way around this issue, but this team relies on these 2 players a lot, more so than most NBA teams rely on their top 2 guys. One quick shameless plug. If you have not checked it out already, please go watch the Stephen A. Smith Hater Manifesto over on the Deep Dive with Rusty Buckets channel. That video took a ton of work. I'm pretty proud of it. I'm especially happy with, we framed it around a documentary, and I wasn't really thrilled by that framing initially, but it ended up working out really, really well. So again, please go check that out, especially because Rudy put on the backpack and carried through that video. So shout out to him. With that said, let's keep it moving. My hope for them this offseason is that they would address this issue by adding depth, in particular scoring depth. But no, they didn't do that. They brought in Al Horford, which I will say, despite him not helping the age issue with this roster, he does fit in perfectly. A big issue Golden State encountered after adding Jimmy is they don't have an ideal 5 to play alongside him and Draymond Green. As a result, they elected to start Draymond at the 5 with Butler and Moody as the 2 forwards and Curry and Pods as the guards. This did work against the Rockets because Houston had actually leaned so far into the other direction there, into the tall ball direction, that the small ball worked as a counter that they couldn't really handle. But against a more well-balanced team, against one where small ball doesn't pose a clear advantage, it was really quite the weakness. They couldn't start Kevon Looney or Trayce Jackson-Davis because they couldn't shoot the three ball. And between Butler, Draymond, and a 5 who can't shoot, doesn't matter that they have the best shooter of all time. The spacing is still shit. Al Horford over the last 3 seasons has shot 41% from 3 on just under 5 attempts per game. He might be old as hell, but I don't see that shot going anywhere. I more so worry about his value on defense, but I still think at the bare minimum he should hold up on that end. Al should also fit right into Golden State's offensive system, as he's both a good and willing screener, as well as a phenomenal passer for a 5. In fact, I would say I'm quite high on this addition. The issue is, a 38-year-old Al Horford shouldn't be their biggest addition, and yet he is. The only other players they added were Seth Curry and DeAnthony Melton. Seth isn't entirely without value. He shoots exceptionally well from 3. It runs in the family. In fact, I believe he had the best 3-point percentage in the league last year. But to me, this addition is primarily just a play to keep Steph happy more than an actual basketball decision. Maybe he can have some kind of bench role down the line, but the last time Seth was on a playoff team, it was the 2023 Brooklyn Nets post-Kevin Durant trade, and he got a DNP in one of those 4 games. Like a comically depleted roster that had no business in the playoffs, and he can't even get a consistent role on that team. Now, DeAnthony Melton, I think at least has a chance to be a pretty key role player for them. He played 6 games for the Dubs last year before tearing his ACL. He was then traded to the Nets for Dennis Schroeder. He never played for the Nets, and then he's heading back to the Dubs this offseason to try again. He has a history of being a really solid 3-and-D guard. Since 2020, he has shot 39% from 3 on 5 attempts per game. He's also a decent secondary ball handler, probably more of like a 3rd-level ball handler, but he averages 2.7 assists again since 2020, so he should also probably fit in okay to the Warriors system. Obviously, it's remarkably small, this sample size, but in the 6 games that he played for the Dubs, they were 14 points better on defense with him there. For a better, more reasonable sample size, in the 22-23 season, the last time he was healthy for the full year, the Philadelphia 76ers were a whole 9 points better on defense with him versus without. That is quite the swing. And I will say, for a guy who got basically no money, for a guy who had basically no real market, it's a pretty good pickup. I do wonder how well he'll recover from this ACL tear. He's not even expected to be ready at the very start of this season. But if he is the same player he was before, then yeah, this is a nice addition. Still, that leaves your best additions on the team lacking depth as a guard with health concerns and a 38-year-old center. They also brought back Jonathan Kuminga, and frankly, I'm really fucking tired of talking about Jonathan Kuminga, so I'm gonna try and make this quick. Kuminga only has one skill that he's genuinely really good at in the NBA level. He is a great slasher and downhill threat, especially in transition and semi-transition, and that finishing capability also works pretty well as a cutter. But the moment the defense is set, things get ugly really quick. Remember the issue I mentioned with the center who can't shoot, meaning that the Dubs would be forced to have 3 non-floor spacers on the court? Same applies to Kuminga. He just can't shoot. He's seen marginal improvement in that area, but it would require a night and day difference for defenses to respect him from outside like at all. He also has horrible playmaking instincts, which really fucks up how Golden State runs their offense. He also has fallen in love with the mid-range pull-up, despite the fact that he is not good at them. The Dubs tried to mold him into a more well-rounded scorer, but he just isn't that. And I'm really tired of them trying to make him one. Yes, he is still young, but that is a negative in the context of this team. Whether it is Pods or Moody who starts, they will be the youngest starter on this team. Next up after them is a 35-year-old Draymond Green. The Warriors need win-now players, not projects. And that's why everyone and their mother is expecting the Dubs to trade Kuminga as soon as they are able to. This could perhaps present more interesting opportunities for Golden State because maybe you can get back some real role players, but odds are they won't be getting back much, especially because there aren't like a ton of teams dying to get the cum bucket on their roster. The only teams who have even been said to have been in talks for him or even implied to have been in talks for him are the Chicago Bulls, Brooklyn Nets, and Sacramento Kings. And those aren't teams with a bunch of role players to spare, nor good contracts to match Kuminga's $24 million a year salary. I think it's about that. So just for the sake of argument, I decided to put together a trade for each of those teams that is the best case scenario for the Dubs, or at least the best case while still being realistic. This isn't on some 2K bullshit. The Bulls could trade Kevin Huerter and either Isaac Okoro or Trey Jones. They could trade Patrick Williams instead of Kevin Huerter, but I imagine the Dubs do not want his 4-year contract for $20 a year. The Nets could trade Terrence Mann and Haywood Highsmith. Those are two pretty good wings. And the Kings could trade Malik Monk and Dario Saric. Do any of those names sound game-changing to you? They really don't to me. Maybe Monk, maybe Highsmith, who I like. So let's just presume that Kuminga will be replaced by Malik Monk by the deadline. That leaves him with a team of Steph Curry, Brandon Pajimski, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, and Al Horford as the starters, with Malik Monk, Moses Moody, Quentin Post, and DeAnthony Melton off of the bench. Does that read as a contender to you, especially in the Western Conference? If all of these players were at their absolute best and healthy for the 2026 playoffs, maybe, okay? Maybe I could see them being a contender. But that's about as high of praise as I can give them. Their best case scenario is what it would take for me to think they're in that class. I expect them to be a good-ass team nevertheless, especially when Butler and Steph are both healthy, a team that would present a challenge to a legitimate contender. But there's just no way I can talk myself into them being better than the Thunder and the Nuggets, and I don't even think I could really talk myself into them being better than the Rockets or honestly either of the LA teams. I don't know. I want to be optimistic because Steph is my favorite player of all time, but I feel like it would be coping for me to think that this is enough. Maybe I'm being too cynical. I know there is a good sect of people who are optimistic about this team, but I tried to be, and at every corner that I turned, I just found more reasons not to be. So yeah, that is it. Thank you so much for watching. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video. Again, go check out the Stephen A. Smith Hater Manifesto if you have not already, but that is it. Goodbye.